like counterfeiting in anabolic steroids, or at least in the world of anabolic steroids, a huge problem. And we all know of stories like, Anaver is never this, or testosterone is always that. Fair enough. And I think there's absolutely some truth in that. If we look, like, what kind of data do we really have? Well, we have one study in the Netherlands where they tested about like 30 or 40 or 50 samples, I don't know anymore, from people that use anabolic steroids. But they only gave us the numbers of which ones are, how big of a percentage is actually correct. So is the label exactly what's in the product, or if it's mixed or there was nothing in it. It doesn't actually say which substances were in it and whether the dosage was right. But we do have some certain border agencies of several countries in the world, like Brazil was in there, Switzerland was in there, France was in there, Belgium was in there, where they intercept anabolic steroids. And because of certain laws, they need to actually test it. So what's actually in it and what is the dose? Okay. And some publications actually detail information about this. So let's start at the beginning. Counterfeiting in anabolic steroids is pretty similar to counterfeiting with any kind of recreational drug. So we all know stories about the junk in the city center that uses cocaine, but then it gets mixed with paracetamol and he gets a really weird high from it. Not good. We all know these stories about undercutting or cutting cocaine with something else, with flour or whatever. The same happens with anabolic steroids, and I'll tell you why. So if we look at what are the statistics, just the percentages of how much is there, how much is actually on the label, of how much of the stuff is actually correct, is there actually testosterone in it, in my testosterone in it, then if you look at all the studies, about 30 to 21% is actually correctly labeled. So 1 in 5, 1 in 7. About a little bit less than half, it's the product that's on the label, but it's mixed with something else.
Okay.
Could be anything. Generally, this is, so let's say you have testosterone. If it's mixed, then it's mixed with a different ester. So testosterone enanthate is also mixed with testosterone propionate. Or when it's, for example, trenbolone, it's trenbolone mixed with testosterone propionate. Okay. If it's nandrolone, it's nandrolone mixed with testosterone propionate. Generally. Why do they do it? Because it's cheaper. Testosterone propionate, testosterone are cheaper than nandrolone, than trenbolone, than mestrone, than primobolan. And at the end of the day, this is generally about making money. So that's what they do. 1/8 to 1/3 is a mix. No, so I got the numbers wrong. So half of it, there's different anabolic steroids. So then testosterone enanthate is testosterone propionate, and trenbolone is testosterone propionate. That's generally what's happening. 1/3 or less is a mix. So then it's testosterone enanthate mixed with testosterone propionate, and about 6 to 24% is placebo. Now you have to remember what does placebo mean. So that means it's just oil or just water, or just oat dust or something. Yeah. And you would say, like, as a doctor doing something with harm reduction, then that last category is really good, right? Yeah. No harm from placebo. And we know people can get really, like, they can get stronger and more muscle just from placebo alone. So good on them. But it is a problem because you're not getting what you want, which is unfair. So what happens often? Well, at the Swiss border about 10 years ago, this is the most recent data we have. I don't have any more recent data than this. So this might be different for your country.
Actually.
Ah, that's good. And it might be different 10 years later. But what I saw in this study is that nandrolone, mestrone, primobolan, and bolanone, which are all generally more expensive products, they get switched around for almost half of the cases with testosterone enanthate. So again, if I look at it from like a doctor's perspective regarding harm reduction, then I would say, well, I'd rather have you taking testosterone enanthate than boldenone or trembolone, or nandrolone.
True.
But if you look at it like, all right, I'm a user of anabolic steroids and I have certain side effects, or I want to plan my cycle intelligently, well, then this is a huge problem. What do you do? Well, there's not much you can do at the end of the day. We still don't know what kind of substances, like what kind of substances are less counterfeited than the other ones. So I made this table, and this is all they found at the Swiss customs. And I put in all the numbers. So
Oh, that
how many?
HCG one, correct dose.
Yeah.
Sure.
So how many had the correct label, and I gave a percentage to it, and how many had the correct dose. And I ordered it from the highest percentage to the lowest percentage. So we start with 100 and we go to trembolone, anethate, and acetate 16. So if you look at the top, something really interesting happens when I order it this way, is that the highest percentages for correct label are accessory medications: HCG, anastrozole, clenbuterol, tamoxifen, clomid. These are not anabolic steroids, but these are supportive medications that people use. These are generally less counterfeited than anabolic steroids. But even if you look at this, like let's take HCG, number one, 100%, it is actually HCG, but the correct dose is only in 24% of these cases. All right. So HCG is generally in a vial of 5,000 units, international units, but in only 24% of all these vials, it's actually 5,000. And generally, they put half in it. So it's not 5,000, but it's 2,500 is actually in it. This is something you see a lot. If the dose is not correct, what happens is in some cases, they overdose it. So it's like 20-30% higher than what's on the label, or they underdose it. And when they underdose it, it's generally by 50%. So they just cut it in half. Why would they cut it in half? Well, yeah, if you're brewing your products at home and you want to make extra margin, then making two little piles from one pile, that is easy work, and that is generally what happens.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. By correct dose, are we talking about the dose mostly being too low than too high in most cases, or how does it depend on the drug? Like certain drugs they'll go overboard with, whereas others they'll underdose.
No. What you generally see all across the board is that about 20-30% it's overdosed.
Okay.
And the other percentage, like 60-70% of all the non-correct dosages, are about half.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what you see. Yeah, it's weird, huh? So, but the interesting thing is like, all these accessory medications are clustered. They're at the top. So if I go to the next category, then I see another category. It's all the oral anabolic steroids, except for HEG in the bottom. Winstrol, Proveron, Anaver, Dianabol. They're clustered again. They are less correct than all the accessories, but still about half of them, there's still the Anabol in it. But the correct dosages go wild. Like Proveron is generally high in correct dosages, but Winstrol is generally low. And especially with Winstrol, what you see is that the dosage is about it's halved, or they upgrade it with about 20%. So similar story to Winstrol. Now, this wouldn't be a problem per se, a little bit higher dosage, a little bit lower dosage, like whatever. You take the pill, there's some anabolic steroid in it, let's go. But especially in the case of Winstrol and Anavar, which are generally oral steroids used by ladies, for a man, it doesn't really matter if he gets 20 milligrams of Anavar or 30 milligrams Anavar. But for ladies, this can be a difference between developing masculinizing symptoms or not. So for ladies, extra careful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing, the third category are all the injectables, and it starts with testosterone enanthate. Generally, half of all testosterone enanthate at the Swiss border 10 years ago was correctly labeled. Somehow, there's no data on the dose, but for all the others, I have that. And you see that primobolan and tren, which are generally the most expensive anabolic steroids, they are hardly ever correct labeled. So there's probably primobolan and tren, generally they're testosterone propionate, and that's about it. But you see in a little percentage that they have, the correct dose is a little bit higher.
Okay.
So when you had good stuff, the chances higher you actually have good stuff. But yeah, you buy primobolan enanthate 200 milligrams per milliliter. Only 80% of all the primobolan is actually primobolan, and then only 50% of that actually has the correct dose. It doesn't look good, man. It doesn't look good.
But it's like at the same time, from I don't know, a business perspective, with these underground labs, surely having better quality or more correct labeling would be beneficial to them, or are us steroid users just that ignorant about what real stuff should be like, and we're just so used to this market being faked from early stages that we don't know what real
Yeah.
is.
I think this is a really good question. Like if you, there's some other studies detailing the whole lineage of production of the testosterone powders to all the intermediate resellers or producers till eventually the consumer. And what you often see is that at a certain moment, multiple brands have the same deviation in substance or in dose.
Okay.
And what that probably means is that the counterfeiting probably starts even at the the sourcing of the powder in China.
Okay.
So and then you see this down the river effect, that all the European brands, they all have the same deviations at a certain time frame. So um, from A to Z, the system is rigged. Are there things that you can do about, like, maybe looking for higher quality products? Well, generally what I advise is buy something as close to the source as possible. So for example, here in Europe, you have certain brands that are quite established,
Yeah.
plus they actually have like a pharmaceutical company behind them. Sometimes it's imported from India, but that's like legit Indian pharmacy stuff that gets leaked to the European underground scene. Probably take something of that and take it from a website that is not a reseller
Okay.
from the product, but is actually the brand itself. Um, so if you're looking for a brand, you see the brand on some kind of website, try to Google for the original website where the brand sells their own stuff. They always do that. The brands always generally sell their own stuff on their own website.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit closer to the source. That might help a little bit.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
big thing here. We've got a lot
yeah.
of resellers online. I think one of them is like Anabolic Junkies, which is a big one here.
Hmm.
And you'll find that a lot of the time they do sell these companies, steroid. However, when you get the packaging, it's completely different. It looks similar, but it's different
Hmm.
from the original labs. But I'm assuming younger guys might not know this and still take whatever they bought from this website. So it's a big issue
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. And like if you say that at the end of the day, like generally there is anabolic steroid in your anabolic steroid.
Yeah.
We know that whether 10 milligrams of trembolone or 10 milligrams of nandrolone or 10 milligrams of testosterone, it doesn't matter that much for your protein turnover, for your muscle growth, but it can influence the side effects you have. Generally,
Yeah.
we see more side effects with the nandrolones and the trembolones than we see that with testosterone. All right. Um, so generally, what this means, if you look at this from a distance, is that means that people think they're using trenbolone or Deca or MPP, but they are actually using testosterone. Does that matter much for their muscle growth? No, it doesn't really matter that much. Does it help them with less side effects? Well, you could say that, probably, maybe. So there might be, like, in a weird, twisted way, there might be a good about this as well. Is there something, like, one of the questions I often get, like, can you test the product, right? That was something you would like to do. Yes, you can. In Europe, there are certain labs you can get your products tested. It's generally really expensive, and there's no guarantee that one vial from one brand, if you test that, okay, maybe that one vial might be right, but the next vial or the next batch might be off again. There's no guarantee, and we've seen that in studies as well. So would it help? Would it be like the end-all solution if we can test our products? No, it wouldn't really matter that much. Okay. So I think we're stuck with this situation. If I'm really honest, this is what it's going to be.
So you're not saying I have bad genetics. You're saying I got bad gear. I got bunk gear.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Especially if you got the
and bad genetics. I got
the anabolic addicts stuff in South Africa, man. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
such low quality.
Big Rami isn't running grams of gear. He just got farmer grade stuff, man.
There you go. Yeah, he's on 300 milligrams of testosterone, winning Olympias. Yeah, it's silly, huh? Like you say it as a joke, but a lot of people think that why were guys so big in the 80s and 70s? Because they had farmer grade gear, and yeah, they had. I was actually reading a book by Robert Kerr. He's an American doctor.
I've got that one also.
And look at him.
Yeah, prescribe Dianabol and stuff. He didn't use crazy dosages though, and it was interesting.
No. Yeah, and he eventually stopped because he noticed that even if you prescribe bodybuilders certain stuff, they would always secretly behind his back would use more.
Yeah.
So he was like, man, these guys and these girls can't be trusted, man. So he stopped doing that. But it's an interesting read nonetheless. I would advise anyone to read that.
So would you say there's any legitimacy to the claim that guys were bigger back in the day or needed lower dosages because they got real stuff? Would you say that's legit or?
No, I don't think so. Testosterone is testosterone. Nandrolone is nandrolone. You could say because of more counterfeiting, we have more products that are dosed at half the percentage. That could be that people think like, hey, I should be using 800 milligrams when I'm actually using 400. Fair enough.
I see.
But at the end of the day, what people then do is they just titrate the dose up, you know?
Yeah.
If it doesn't give them what they need, they titrate the dose up. So then you can have guys saying, I use 2 grams, but they actually only use the gram. That's perfectly, like, that can absolutely happen.